finding, assuming it's real. The direction of the claimed flow is towards the constellations Centaurus and Hydra. In fact, it's towards something beyond the cosmic horizon in the same direction as these constellations. This is an odd coincidence. We already know that there's something very massive in that direction. It's the so-called Great Attractor. Since 1973, we've noticed that galaxies in the local part of the universe seem to be drawn in that direction due to an unseen gravitational influence. We now think that this might be the center of the Laniakea supercluster, which is a vast cluster of clusters that encompasses hundreds of millions of light years and several hundred entire galaxy clusters. But the Great Attractor is not causing the dark flow, because that flow seems to affect galaxies across the observable universe, or to 2.5 billion light years at least, far beyond the gravitational reach of Laniakea. So what causes dark flow? If it's real, then the leading explanation is that it's a relic of a gravitational attraction towards something beyond the edge of the observable universe. Now, that part of the greater universe can no longer influence us. It's moving away from us faster than the speed of light and is now forever beyond the reach of light or gravity or anything. However, that wasn't always the case. In the earliest instance of the Big Bang, the observable universe was compressed into a subatomic scale. Things that are now beyond the cosmic horizon were close enough to affect us gravitationally. Then, the event known as cosmic inflation caused an exponential expansion that threw these once neighbors far, far apart. Yet the relics of their influence may remain. What if, somewhere beyond our cosmic horizon, there exists a region of much more stuff? A different bubble of observable universe with more galaxies, more clusters, more dark matter. Such a region may have given our entire universe such a gravitational tug that even 13.7 billion years later, we still see a faint drift in that direction. Whether or not dark flow is real is still unresolved. We need to better understand why the different teams get different results. However, we may also need a better map of the cosmic microwave background so that we can measure more clusters to greater distances and higher precision. However, if dark flow does turn out to be real, we may have detected for the first time the influence of a neighboring region of the greater universe, beyond the horizon of observable space-time. Last week, we talked about the actual rules by which Feynman diagrams can be used to describe real interactions in quantum electrodynamics. Well, let's look at your comments. A couple of you pointed out that the Feynman diagram vertex, representing interactions between an electron, positron, and photon, is not by itself a valid diagram. And that is right, and probably I should have mentioned that in the episode. In fact, vertices are really just building blocks for Feynman diagrams. By themselves, they don't obey momentum conservation. This is something we didn't get into. Incoming and outgoing particles must obey energy and momentum conservation. For example, in order to conserve momentum, an annihilating electron and positron must produce 2 photons, not 1. Samuel Bender asks whether electrons and positrons in Barbour scattering have to remain on their respective sides of the diagram, or whether they can cross paths. Well, actually, the spatial positions and even directions of motions of particles in the diagrams don't mean much at all. Each incoming and outgoing particle is identified with a numerical position and momentum, and we don't need to worry about drawing the diagrams accurately to represent those. So in short, the answer is yes. The final directions of motions can be anything within the realms of possibility of physics. Jojo Modding asks, what if one incoming electron is entangled to another electron? Well, that's a really good question. The answer is that the states of the outgoing particles are also entangled with that other electron. Upon measurement of the properties of the outgoing particles, weird entanglement correlations can still occur. In the case of single entanglement, say of 2 electrons, measurement of the properties of one of the electrons appears to influence the state of the other, as though that influence propagates back in time along the path of the measured electron. But if that measurement instead happens after the electron undergoes an interaction represented by a Feynman diagram, then we need to think of that retrocausal influence as also propagating through the infinite possible interactions within the virtual space of the Feynman diagram. Squidmaster started studying physics and got a tattoo of a Feynman diagram, then switched majors to economics. Squid, I'm sorry that you and physics broke up, but that's a relationship that leaves its mark on you for life.
Copy that, ELCOM. All systems are go for entry, descent, landing. Stand by. Stand by.
At the dawn of the 21st century, space agencies in Europe and America began making plans to land the first humans on Mars. But manned missions to the Red Planet have been proposed before. For some, Mars holds the answers to mankind's future in space. Others say Mars is too far, too dangerous, and too expensive for humans to explore. And in a world torn by troubles, some say there is no need, or will, for mankind to reach into space anymore. More than 30 years after the last Apollo astronaut walked on the moon, the American manned space program seems to have lost its way, unable to reach beyond even low Earth orbit.
We've got a problem. NASA has been literally going around in circles with its space program for the past 30 years.
Astronautical engineer Dr. Robert Zubrin has been arguing for years that sending humans to Mars is the mission the space program needs.
It's time that we set goals for NASA that were worthy of the risks of human spaceflight. Mars is the next logical step in our space program. It's the challenge that's been staring us in the face for the past 30 years. It's the planet that's most likely Earth. It's the planet that has on it the resources needed to support life and therefore someday technological civilization. It's the planet that will provide us with the answer as to whether life is prevalent in the universe or exclusive to the Earth. And it's the planet that will give us the critical test as to whether humanity can break out of the planet of our birth and become a spacefaring species.
In the the early 1990s, Zubrin was the head of the Mars Direct program at Martin Marietta Astronautics. His team developed a mission to Mars that could be done at a fraction of NASA's projected costs. Using only existing technology, Zubrin argues that the first steps on Martian soil could be made within 10 years.
There is absolutely nothing in this that is beyond our technology.
We are not ready to send humans to Mars right now. We don't know how to keep them alive. There are people out there who say we can go to Mars tomorrow. One of my requirements, one of NASA's requirements, is that if we send humans to Mars, we bring them back alive.
For the past 15 years, Zubrin and his colleagues have waged a campaign to convince society and the political class that humans on Mars should be the goal for NASA now. This is the story of our cold neighboring planet and the debate over whether man's fate is tied to the red world. It's the story of an engineer's journey and the battle of ideas over which direction in space will truly benefit